Good afternoon, and thank you for taking time away from your families and businesses to join us for this Epic Insight. This is Brian Lenz, Director of Sales here at Epic Retirement Plan Services, and I'll be your host for today's call. I'm excited to be joined by John Kutz of Templeton, who will share some of their findings from their recent Voice of the American Worker study. The goal of the research was to understand the perspective of the modern American worker, which unsurprisingly to me, and I'm sure many of you, has changed meaningfully throughout the past few years. As John will illuminate, there has never been a more urgent time to evaluate your benefit offering and consider ways to evolve the way you support employee needs. As always, your line will be muted throughout the call, but if you have any questions you'd like addressed at the end of the session, please do enter those in the questions panel, and I will throw them at John at our conclusion. With that, John, I'll turn it over to you.
Brian, thanks a lot, and it's really a pleasure, and I'm happy to be with you folks today to review our most recent Voice of the American Worker survey conducted by the Harris Poll and is commissioned by Franklin Templeton. This is our second annual survey. We did the same type of survey end of October and into November in 2020 and 2021. And as Brian alluded to, I'm excited to share with you some of the trends that American workers would want from their employers. I think if I could ask from one thing is if there's some takeaways, if the one takeaway would be from this webinar would be exactly what Brian said, and that is reviewing the benefit stack with the employers just to make sure that they're competitive, given that the needs of the worker and what they're seeking from their benefits based on our survey has changed tremendously. So with that, I'm going to turn off my camera. You don't need to see my ugly mug, and we'll get started and we'll talk about the survey. Oops. I'm not getting to it to advance, Brian. I don't know why.
I still see your home page there. You should have control. I do not have control of your
There we go.
Screen.
Okay, good. We got it. We're good. So the concept of this study came out of an event that Franklin Templeton hosted in March of 2020. We brought a group of industry experts into San Mateo, into our headquarters. We were trying to get a sense of what is it that the US retirement system really needs based upon the observations from these industry experts. The idea was to obtain information so that we could improve the future of retirement, but at the same time and selfishly help Franklin Templeton from a strategy and product development perspective. So today we're going to cover a couple different things. I'm going to review with you the methodology of the survey, whom we surveyed, the demographics, and then I'm going to give you an overview of kind of the 4 key findings from the survey. And then we're going to dive into each of those key findings, which we're calling parts 1 through parts 4. So first and foremost, the methodology associated with our survey. As I mentioned, Harris Poll was commissioned to perform the survey. It was done in late October to mid-November. We talked in this year to a little over 1,005 employee. You can see from a regional distribution, pretty solid regional demographics, as well as gender, and then generationally, you can see the breakdown. The generation breakdown of the responses is also consistent with the general US workforce. One key thing that I would bring to your attention is that all of the folks with whom we spoke were employed and also had some type of a retirement plan. You can see on the slide the type of retirement plan that each of those folks had. So what were the 4 key findings that we discovered? First and foremost, American workers are reevaluating how they think about work. I want to make sure that I bring to their attention, this is not intended to be any type of a COVID related survey, but it's hard given the fact that we've been in a pandemic for the last 2 years um, to not recognize the impact that it has had on employers. First point that I would bring out is that almost 44% of US workers are either considering leaving their job or have already left their job in the past year. I think we've heard of that as either the great retirement or the great resignation, right? Um, what's been interesting is that when employees leave their job and then begin to evaluate a new job, they're indicating that salary and benefits are equally as important, with 84% of the respondents noting the importance of benefits helping their financial well-being. I would share with you that the majority of those folks, 64% of those folks, as you can see in the slide, believe that that employers can do a better job in terms of the overall benefits that are being offered to the workforce. That's key finding number 1. Key finding number 2 is that most respondents, and it's a high percentage, are indicating that financial independence is more important to them than a traditional retirement. And this idea of financial independence is that workers want this flexibility and freedom, and it can really retire on their own terms. We're going to walk through what some of those measures are, but the reality is it's more about financial independence than what we may have and our parents and grandparents have been used to over the, working for that 40 plus years and then retiring and then checking off your bucket list. To have that financial independence is going to require us as an industry to provide more personalized solutions to the workforce. And in order to provide more personalized solutions, we're going to need to obtain more information and data from employees. And there's where there's a trade-off with employees in terms of having that detailed information so that we can offer a personalized solution versus the privacy concerns and considerations that many have. That said, you can see the last bullet point, 87% of employees are willing to give some type of personal information in exchange for more personalized benefits. Key finding number 3, and that is workers seeking well-being, but they also need support in addressing some existing roadblocks, and one key roadblock in particular. Similar to last year's survey, this survey in 2021 clearly shows that financial health is equally as important to workers as mental and physical health. However, most employees would tell you that they feel least in control of their financial health. And the reason that they feel not in control of their financial health because of health, there's certainly a villain out there in the form of debt. And we're going to see, we're going to focus in on debt in a lot of detail. And why is that creating not just stress, but why is that the key obstacle to what we just discussed in terms of financial independence? And then finally, we're going to take a look at, go into more detail on the 4th key finding, and that is a focus on well-being includes the urgency improving their financial health, and the employer plays a key role in that. You're gonna learn that employees truly do seek help from their employers, specifically to assistance with and access to financial professionals, financial planning tools, and then finally financial education. You're going to see that 8 in 10 employees really want to be rewarded for this good behavior in the form of incentives from their employer. And then finally, you're going to learn, and we're going to go into more detail, that people want more in the form of benefits from their employer, and they also want their employer to make sure that the benefits that they are being offered are clearly the best that they can possibly be. So let's dive into a little more detail specific to American workers and how they're reevaluating how they think about work. So American workers are reassessing what they want from work. 67% saying the COVID-19 pandemic and changes it's brought to the workplace have made me reassess what I'm looking for in my employer. And again, this isn't a pandemic specific study, but the current state of the world has certainly highlighted how important certain aspects of work life is to employees. On the slide that you can see, most employees look to align with a company that shares their values. So culture has become increasingly important to workers. And they're also seeking more opportunities to pursue their personal passions. As I alluded to, 44% of folks are either looking to make a change or have already made a change. Turnover is at all-time high. There's no question that there is an increase in this employee turnover. You'll see on the slide where companies have either significantly increased employee turnover or somewhat increased turnover. You can see that those two combined at about 61% increase. So employees are absolutely shopping their options. Interestingly enough, it's not just that employees are being wooed by the competitors in their industry, but they're also looking outside their industry for opportunities. Also pointing out on the slide here, you can see from a retirement perspective, and you can see it as a sub-bullet point on the title slide, 50% of the turnover is associated with some type of retirement, whether it be early retirement, traditional age retirement, or otherwise. So retirement is really factored into the turnover that we've experienced as well. And as I've mentioned earlier, employees are highly interested in things like culture, in addition to traditional metrics like salary, as you can see on the slide. And you'll note culture is a particularly important consideration for the Gen Xers, that younger employee. So also when looking at all of these considerations, I'd like you to just look at the prevalence of the word well-being. You can see it from the fourth consideration down, whether it's financial well-being at 84%, mental well-being at 82%, physical well-being at 81%. So salary may be the top consideration, but there's a lot more being considered other than money. Employees care how they're treated by their employer. 87% saying how my employer treats me and my fellow employees is just as important as how much they're willing to pay. And then when considering a job opportunity, in the middle of the slide, you'll see the importance of salary versus benefits. They're nearly equal in their weighting at 51% and 49%. So I'm going to repeat, employees are giving equal consideration to how much they're being paid and the quality of the benefits from their employer when they're making career decisions. And probably the least surprising finding on this slide, albeit important in rounding out our point that employees are considering the whole package, is that workers agree that hybrid and fully remote office environments are often critical to this increasingly flexible reality. So if your clients and your companies are not offering hybrid as well as fully remote, that clearly is going to put them at a disadvantage vis-a-vis competitors. So our takeaway: American workers are reevaluating how they think about work and what they expect from their employers. And what I would say is it's critical for employers to review the benefit stack, their benefit offering, and the work environment that they're offering to their employees to ensure that they are competitive. So let's look at the second key finding, and that is workers remain more focused on financial independence than traditional retirement. So as we found with last year's results, workers are not identifying with this concept of traditional retirement. As I alluded to, that 30 to 40 years and then you hit an age or a milestone and you retire. Rather, it's financial independence is the most important goal. And a large majority of the workers, 84%, would state that I'm more focused on becoming financially independent than on traditional retirement. And employees continue to redefine these financial milestones. I'm going to go through the milestones on the next page that have an eye towards freedom and flexibility, that setting out those goals will help them meet their ideal of financial independence. So what are those milestones associated with financial independence? Well, on this slide, you'll see, and it's to the 2020 survey results and the 2021 survey results. There are things like having enough money to live comfortably until the end of my life, achieving financial independence, feel satisfied with my financial well-being, having enough money to stop working. And when compared to last year's studies, you'll see all but one of those milestones are the same or have increased. So these milestones obviously mean something different to everyone. What my milestones are compared to Brian's are going to be completely different, which necessitates that we're going to need to present more personalized solutions and strategies to meet each worker's unique goals and needs. So financial independence requires personalized solutions, but that's going to require workers to provide personalized information. And the question begs to be asked, how comfortable are these US workers in terms of sharing information? So you can see on the slide, basic personal information, 63% of respondents said, yeah, I'll share that information. But when you start to get down to financial information, such as account balances, investments, financial planning, item number 5, you can see that number drops to 36%. So it's going to be a real challenge. It's critical that we know as much as we can about somebody's full financial picture in order to provide that perfect personalized solution to help them meet their goals. But the good news is that there is hope. We do see a desire for personalization slightly outweighing privacy concerns. You can see that on the middle of the slide, where 55% would say I would prefer my employer use all the available information to personalize my benefits as much as possible. On the left-hand side of the slide, you can see 87% would be comfortable sharing some kind of information with employers in exchange for some of those more personalized benefits. So something to work with for sure, but enlightening in that the reality is we're going to have to overcome some of the trust issues we have associated with that, obtaining that incremental data. But despite the hesitancy in providing it, most employees are looking for suitable strategies. The desire's there for sure. I think this is consistent with what we've seen in the retirement industry for some time, and that is 68% wish that their employer would recommend financial strategies to me based upon my income and financial goals. I mean, it's the reality is, and we see this today, is employees just want us to tell them what to do, right? Tell me what to do. With this incremental information, ideally that we can obtain, ideally we're going to be able to provide more personalized solutions with all of the data. So let's summarize key finding number 2. Workers remain more focused on financial independence than traditional retirement. Financial independence is going to require more personalized solutions. To deliver those personalized solutions, we're going to need more personal information. And those privacy considerations that people have brought to the table, they're going to need to be overcome in order for us to present that ideal, personalized solution. So let's focus on key finding number 3, and that is workers continue to seek improved well-being, and they need support in addressing existing roadblocks, especially one roadblock. So again, this compares the survey that we did in 2020 to 2021. Some of the most powerful takeaways from last year's studies were again reaffirmed this year. Workers are placing equal importance in three areas when considering their overall well-being, that being physical health, mental health, and financial health. This year, they rated the three with even more equal importance. You can see 79% for mental and physical health, and then 77% with financial health. But as I said at the outset, most of the respondents feel least in control with their financial health. You can see the gap being 24% in 2021, up from 21% last year. So they feel feel less in control, this year than they did last year. And why do you think that is? Well, as I've alluded to already, it's because of debt. That's really the villain. That's really what's preventing the U.S. worker, and we've heard this daily. It's in direct conflict with the goal that we just discussed in terms of financial independence. So, credit card debt reigns supreme, followed by, as you can see on the slide, mortgage and home equity debt, and then followed by, you can see, with utility, cell phone, and auto loan debt. And the one key thing is that most workers, a vast majority of workers, are carrying multiple forms of these debts, which further exacerbates the issue. So let's peel back the onion just a little bit more, and how could it be impacting workers? If 83% of the workers carry at least one type of debt, how does it make them feel? You can see on the slide, 60% would say, I'm concerned about my current debt levels. 56%, it's preventing them from taking financial risks that they might otherwise taken. And then finally, 45% says it doesn't seem like it will ever be possible to pay off my debt. So I want you to take a look at the special shout out that we put at the bottom as it relates to student loans. This was very enlightening to me. 76% of workers with student loan debt agree I would have planned my education differently if I'd have known that I would accrue as much student debt as I have. Ouch, that's painful. So clearly debt is a major obstacle for most workers. It's what's impacting financial stress. If you look at the next page, financial stress is a significant contributor to workers' overall well-being. 59% feel that my current level of financial stress affects my overall well-being. Just some stats from last year's survey that we accrued. We didn't put it in the slide deck here, but last year it came back that over 50% of the workers are spending at least 3 hours per week at work focused on their personal financial stress and personal financial issues. So there's no question that workers are stressed by debt. 64% would say their financial stress is largely due to factors other than COVID, and would be similar under normal circumstances. And that's 76% for baby boomers. And then 68% expect financial stress to remain the same or increase 1 year from now. So I'm going to repeat the same thing I did at the onset. It's not pandemic specific. The current stress is largely due to other factors than the pandemic. It's interesting that people believe that their financial stress is not going to be at the same level a year from today that it is today. So let's summarize key findings number 3. Workers continue to seek improved well-being and need support in addressing existing roadblocks, especially debt. I would say that is the biggest roadblock to financial independence that employees have. Employers are going to be able to play a role in that, I believe, as we look at the benefit stack and we start to think about things such as employee saving programs and debt consolidation programs. Those are going to be the programs that are going to have the greatest impact to the employer. And those, to the extent that we can overcome some of those obstacles, will certainly allow those employees to begin to invest in their various retirement plans. So let's talk about our last key finding. which is well-being. A focus on well-being continues to include urgency in improving financial health, and the employer can play a very important role in all of this. So when you think about today, employers believe that their employers care more about the physical and mental health versus their financial health. And that shouldn't be a surprise really to anyone, in that most of us have experienced an increase in wellness programs over the last decade or so that are focused on physical health. Things like free yoga classes at work, free fruit in the kitchen, fitness challenges, those kinds of programs. But there really hasn't been any of those kinds of programs that are focused on financial wellness. On the right-hand side, though, you can see that most employees, 70%, would welcome financial and debt training from their employer, and the majority think their employer could do more to help them manage their finances. So what are employees interested in? Employees are interested in financial management and education programs and benefits. And when you ask them what types of resources their employers either offer and they use, or employers don't offer but they would use, include financial professionals. 56% of employees mention advice from a financial professional. 62% of employees mention planning tools. And then finally, on the far right-hand side of the slide, 54% of employees mention financial education. As with last year's studies, employees do want to be held accountable, but at the same time, 8 out of 10 employees would welcome incentives from their employees for good behavior across mental, physical, and financial health. They wish they had more help developing good financial habits. I think there's a large majority of employees are asking for help, and they're willing to be held accountable in meeting the goals that are established. So I think this is an interesting punch list that we could look at when asked to employees, what is it, if given a choice, that they would want from their benefits? Most would indicate that, unlike last year, I should point out, where last year they said that they preferred an increase in their 401k match, this past year you can see that they really are looking for an increase to pay. And I'm sure that it has a lot to do with the increase in inflation that we've seen. But clearly, increase in pay is the top priority. But also the 401k match equally is very important too. Some of the other interesting things they're looking for their employer to provide would be things like guaranteed income, perhaps a contribution, as I mentioned earlier, to an emergency savings fund or even a health savings account, perhaps funding options for their children's education, and then contribution towards debt payments, those debt consolidation programs, if you will. So again, this is a great punch list, I believe, for those employers who are looking to consider updates to their benefit offering. Whatever it is, workers are looking for more. 64% of employees say that they're looking for more out of my employment benefits than my employer currently offers. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that 84% have said, I want to be able to count on my employer to deliver the best benefits without having to think about it. So there must be some doubt in employees' minds that their employer actually is evaluating and offering the best possible benefits to them. So let's summarize key findings number 4. And that is that a focus on well-being continues to include urgency in improving financial health, with key opportunities for the employer to support. And there is urgency in these statements. When you match them with some of the stats that I shared at the beginning of this discussion, the amount of people obviously leaving, it's important that we've noted the amount of people leaving or considering leaving their jobs, the equal importance that salary and benefits play to employees when considering new job opportunities, and then how financial stress impacts daily life and work. So if an employer is not providing those benefits, my sense is that employees are going to look to somebody else that possibly will. So let's summarize. So we talked about how Americans workers are reevaluating how they think about work. We talked about the importance of culture. We talked about the importance of work-life balance. And we also talked about the work environment itself in terms of opportunities for hybrid as well as remote work. Employers need to think about many of those things so that they stay competitive and are able to retain their employee base. Secondly, workers remain focused on financial independence than traditional retirement, right? That's where we talked a lot about, the idea of freedom, what are those key things that people are looking for this independence, rather than working towards a retirement age 30 to 40 years. We highlighted the need for more personalized solutions, which is going to require additional data that we're receiving from employees. And we're going to have to overcome the whole privacy considerations that employees have in terms of obtaining that data. Thirdly, workers continue to seek improved well-being and need support in addressing really debt. Well-being, we found the whole idea of well-being being physical health, mental health, financial health, with people feeling least in control over their financial well-being, and the need and the support that they need in terms of debt management, around education and training that they're looking to obtain. And they're looking to obtain it. Then in the first bullet or in the fourth bullet point on this improving financial health, they're seeking assistance from financial professionals and education, and they're really looking to the employer as the source where they would obtain those kinds of resources and education. So there's a lot to the survey. In my mind, as financial professionals, there's a lot that we can take away from the survey, share with employers, whether they're existing clients or potentially whether they're prospects, in terms of helping them understand the importance of the evaluation of the current benefit stack and how competitive it is. Just kind of as a small advertisement, to the extent that you're interested in these resources, the presentation that I walked through, we do have a website. We have a landing page at franklintempleton.com. If you were to type in Voice of the American Worker, you'd be able to find this presentation as well as a summarization of the key findings. As I mentioned too, there's a web page and there's a blog that we maintain and we keep updated on an ongoing basis. So Brian, with that, I'm going to pause. I don't know if there's any questions or not, but I want to say thanks to you for providing me with the opportunity to share the survey, Voice of the American Worker.
I appreciate that, John. And one thing stood out to me, at least the American worker was honest this year and admitted they just want a bigger paycheck rather than a higher 401k deferral like last year.
That's
kind of
surprised me last year, Brian, truly.
I guess maybe you could add your own personal color commentary on this if the survey itself didn't flush it out, but I guess one camp would argue that maybe until the recent pandemic, employees were moving further and further away from employers as a source for all of their well-being needs. I mean, you mentioned the several buckets, whether it's mental, physical, financial. Why one could make the argument, why is it an employer's responsibility to necessarily take care of those items? And of course, it can be self-serving for the employer to do so, but would the recent extremely competitive job market that, we're certainly seeing at Epic, and anecdotally, many of our record keeper and administrative peers are seeing, has that kind of refueled competition in the area of employers need to do more because they have to now to get people? Or What
Yeah.
what's your take on all of that? I mean, it's a kind of an interesting
Yeah.
dynamic going on right now.
I do believe that employers, I mean, when you think about where they get the majority of workers, where they're getting their benefits, to me, it doesn't come as a surprise that they're looking for their employer to provide it, right? They get their insurance from their employer, they get, their retirement from their employer. Many of these workers, don't have their own financial advisor. So that aspect doesn't surprise me that they're looking to their employer. But I absolutely do believe that this, call it great resignation or great retirement, and just the number of people that have left the workforce, and as associated as a result, this competitiveness is forcing workers to have to take a look to make sure that their competitive their benefits are on par, if not better, than their competitors. And maybe in the past it was okay just to be, close, or that you offered, but I do believe now that you need to be viewed as having strong benefits, because they're being evaluated on par with salary. So my take is yes, this lack of employee base really is hindered, has really been an obstacle, and it is forcing benefits to be reevaluated.
Got it. No, thanks for that insight. And I know we're over time, folks. I just to spur future conversation as it relates to, the financial health of employees and what we can do on the 401k side. I encourage you to reach out to your Epic sales consultants or RMs if you're interested in personalized managed accounts. Obviously, some demand for that flushed out of this survey. We have that available at Epic. We also include on every plan a complimentary financial wellness module that does focus on debt reduction strategies and some of the big ticket purchases like homes and cars that individuals can make. So if you haven't dug into any of that, we'd love to have that conversation. And I know that John and the folks at Franklin Templeton are doing some cool things with goal optimization and taking care of employees that way. So I encourage you to reach out to John and the Franklin Templeton DCIO team as well if this is a concept you want to pursue and move the needle with. And as a reminder, we will send out a copy of the slides that John shared, and you can obviously access further details at the Franklin Templeton website. And first and foremost, wish you safety and health as you support your families, colleagues, and clients. And thanks again to John and the Franklin Templeton team.
Thanks, Brian.
Appreciate it, everyone. Take care.